I stood in my kitchen staring at the notification on my phone, the numbers blurring, sharpening, then burning into me with a clarity that felt like a slap. $11,000. $11,000 charged to my credit card. Not by a thief, not by a hacker, by my own family, my parents, so my sister could enjoy a luxury cruise she didn't pay a dime for. My mother's voice echoed in my head from just 5 minutes earlier, bright and careless, wrapped in laughter that felt like a blade. "It's not like you ever travel anyway, Mara, don't be dramatic." As if my bank account was communal property, as if my life existed to cushion hers, as if asking for basic respect made me ridiculous. I could still hear the clinking of glasses behind her, hear Nadia giggling about needing a break, hear my father saying, "She'll be fine, Mara always figures it out." They weren't even hiding the conversation. I wasn't invited, not that they thought I should care. They had taken my money, my boundaries, and now my silence for granted. But standing there with the cold laminate floor under my feet and the cheap overhead light humming above me, something inside me shifted so sharply it felt like a bone snapping back into place after years out of alignment. I didn't yell, I didn't argue, I didn't beg. I just whispered into the phone, "Enjoy your trip," and hung up. They thought that meant defeat. What they didn't know, what they had never imagined, was that it was the beginning of the end. The beginning of me. And the moment I finally stopped being the daughter they could exploit. I placed my phone slowly on the counter, my fingers steady in a way that felt foreign. For years, any conflict with my family made my stomach twist, my pulse pound, my throat tighten. But right now, nothing. No panic, no guilt, no reflex to fix what wasn't mine to fix. Just a cold, calm awareness humming through my body. My apartment felt unusually quiet. Not empty, just peaceful. The refrigerator hummed softly. A distant car rumbled past outside. My own breathing was the loudest thing in the room. $11,000. I said the number aloud, testing the weight of it. It didn't crush me. If anything, it clarified everything. I took a long sip of the coffee I'd forgotten on the counter. It was lukewarm and bitter, but grounding. I pulled a chair out and sat, folding my hands on the table like I was preparing for a conversation with myself. Because I was. My mother's words repeated, each one clearer than the last. "We're your parents. What's yours is ours. Don't make this difficult." As if they hadn't made everything difficult for years. As if they hadn't chipped away pieces of my autonomy until all that remained was obligation wearing the mask of daughterly devotion. I opened the banking app again, not because I needed to see the charge, but because I wanted to see it without flinching. $11,000 for a luxury cruise cabin. Suite level, all-inclusive, excursions added. They hadn't been frugal with my money. Why would they? They didn't think it was mine. My phone buzzed with another message. I didn't rush to read it, not this time. I picked it up slowly and glanced at the preview. "Mom, don't be so sensitive. You know your sister needs this." Needs. Nadia needed a break from her own recklessness. Nadia needed rest from the emotional strain of cheating on her ex-husband and playing the victim afterward. Nadia needed a week of pampering while I worked through weekends to stay afloat. And I needed, apparently, nothing. Another buzz. "Dad, make sure you pay the balance. Don't screw up your credit score." I laughed, a sharp sound that didn't feel like humor. Credit score. They were enjoying a suite with ocean views and unlimited champagne, and their concern was my credit score. I set the phone aside and pressed both palms against the table. My skin tingled, my thoughts sharpened. I wasn't spiraling, I wasn't panicking. Something inside me was waking. The apartment felt too small suddenly, like the walls were pushing outward, making space for this new clarity. I stood and paced toward the window, looking down at the parking lot below. A woman walked her dog. A teenager skateboarded past. A man loaded groceries into his car. Ordinary people living their ordinary lives, lives where their parents didn't drain them dry. I wondered what that felt like. Then I stopped wondering. I didn't need to imagine. I could make it real. My gaze drifted to the folder on top of the bookshelf, the one I never touched because it contained everything that tied me to the house my parents had taken over: the deed, the tax records, maintenance receipts. I walked toward it, slowly, carefully, almost reverently. I pulled the folder down and placed it on the table. The deed sat on top. My name. Only my name. Not theirs. Mine. I traced the lettering with my fingertip, remembering the day I'd closed on that house. 27 years old, exhausted from juggling jobs, but proud. Proud enough to cry in my car afterward. That house had been mine, my sanctuary, my fresh start. Until my parents' temporary stay stretched into 5 years of them living rent-free while I paid everything, including my own rent somewhere else, because bringing my boyfriend around wasn't appropriate under their roof. I flipped through the tax statements, all paid by me: the utilities, the repairs, the roof patching, the plumbing fixes, even the landscaping because my mother insisted the front hedges looked sad. They had lived in a house I built on sacrifices, and they treated it like an entitlement. And now, $11,000 was the price tag of my breaking point. I didn't plan the next thought. It rose on its own, clear and cold and pure. Sell the house. The idea didn't frighten me. It soothed me. It felt like stepping into sunlight after living in a room with curtains nailed shut. Sell the house. My breath deepened. My shoulders loosened. My heartbeat felt steady, strong, certain. I picked up my phone, not to respond to my parents, but to search. Real estate agents in my area, market conditions, how fast homes were selling. It took seconds to find the information. Homes in my neighborhood were going under contract within days. Days. My fingers hovered over one listing in particular. A woman with excellent reviews, direct, efficient, unafraid of complicated situations. Her name, Riley, looked bold under her headshot. Before fear could whisper anything, before doubt could claw its way up, I tapped call. She answered on the second ring, her voice crisp and professional. "Hello, this is Riley." "Hi," I said, steady and calm. "My name is Mara Jensen. I'm the sole owner of a property, and I'd like to sell quickly." "Occupied?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "By family." "I see," she said. And somehow she did. "Are they tenants?" "No." "Contributing financially?" "No." "Then legally," Riley said, her tone firm. "You're free to proceed." The words unlocked something. A vault. A cage. "How soon can we start?" I asked. "I can meet you for a walkthrough tomorrow morning." "Tomorrow works," I said immediately. "Great," she replied. "Bring your documents. We'll take it from there." When the call ended, I didn't collapse or cry. I didn't pace or second-guess myself. I closed the folder, placed it beside my keys, and whispered a sentence I had never allowed myself to say out loud. "I'm done." My phone buzzed again. I didn't even look this time. I walked to the balcony and opened the door. Cool air rushed in, brushing against my skin like a blessing. Below me, life went on. Cars moving, people talking, the world spinning in its quiet rhythm. None of them knew what I'd just decided. None of them needed to. This moment wasn't for anyone else. It was mine. Tomorrow, I would walk through the house my parents believed belonged to them. Tomorrow, I would reclaim it piece by piece. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tonight, though, tonight I let myself breathe. The deepest breath I'd taken in years. Because $11,000 didn't break me, it freed me. And for the first time in my life, my story was finally, undeniably, about to belong to me. I woke up the next morning with a strange stillness in my chest, the kind that follows after a storm passes and leaves the world looking unfamiliar. My apartment was quiet, almost too quiet, as if it had been holding its breath all night waiting for me to open my eyes. For one brief second, I wondered if I'd dreamed the entire thing. The phone call, the laughter in my mother's voice, the charge on my credit card, the hollow acceptance I'd forced into my tone when I told her to enjoy the trip. But then I looked at my phone charging on the nightstand, at the email still sitting open on the screen with the subject line, "Your recent purchase, $11,000 542s," and the weight of everything settled back into my bones. I didn't feel angry. The absence of anger surprised me more than anything else. I felt done. Hollowed out, maybe, but steady. Like a boat that had been tossed around in a storm for years and had just now found an anchor. That steadiness scared me a little. It meant something inside me had shifted in a way that couldn't be undone. I lay there for a moment longer before grabbing my phone and opening the work app. My hand hovered over the Request Time Off button. I hadn't used it in over 2 years. I was the reliable one, the one who covered shifts, the one who trained new employees, the one who never called in sick. But the thought of sitting through another day of spreadsheets and billing cycles while pretending nothing was wrong made my stomach twist. I tapped the button. My voice sounded foreign even to me as I left the message. "Hi, this is Mara Jensen. I won't be in today, not feeling well." A lie, and yet the most truthful thing I'd said in months. Because the sickness wasn't physical. It was emotional exhaustion, the kind that eats you from the inside until there's nothing left to pick at. The kind my family pretended didn't exist. I made coffee. The strong kind I usually avoided because it made my heart race. Today, I wanted the strength. I needed something bitter to cut through the fog in my chest. I sat at the small table near the kitchen window, watching a pale winter sun crawl over the horizon, and let the memories come. Not because I wanted to relive them, but because I needed to understand the pattern I kept falling back into. I remembered being 12, hearing my sister Nadia scream because her dress for the school play was too tight, and how my mother had turned to me and snapped, "Why didn't you tell me she outgrew it? You should pay more attention." As if I were her mother, not her older sister. I remembered working through every high school summer while Nadia spent her vacations at dance camps my parents paid for without blinking. I remembered buying my first cheap car with babysitting money, only for Nadia to borrow it so often that people at school started asking if I even knew how to drive. I remembered the day I signed the papers for the house, my house, and my parents walked in like they were arriving at a hotel they already owned. My mother had clapped her hands together, smiling broadly. "This will be perfect for us. So much space. And you'll stay in the small room, of course. We need the larger one for our backs." My back, my money, my house, their comfort. It had always been like this. Every holiday, every birthday, every crisis. I was the problem solver, the wallet, the spare parent, the afterthought. But yesterday had been different. Yesterday, something inside me had cracked open, and the light that came through wasn't warm. It was sharp, cold, clarifying. My mother's laughter over the phone echoed through my mind again. "It's not like you ever travel anyway." As if my life existed solely to bankroll theirs. As if my worth was measured in dollars, not feelings. As if my sacrifices were obligations. I sipped my coffee slowly, letting the heat burn my throat. I needed to see things clearly. I needed to face the truth I had spent years convincing myself wasn't real. My family didn't love me. They loved what I did for them. That realization didn't crush me. It didn't make me cry. It simply settled into place like a puzzle piece that had been missing for years. It explained everything. The years of guilt, the manipulation, the dismissive laughter, the lack of gratitude, the entitlement. I set my coffee cup down and reached for the drawer where I kept important documents. The folder containing the house deed, insurance policies, property tax records, maintenance receipts, all of it neatly organized because I was the responsible one, was heavier than I remembered. I spread the papers across the table, letting them form a mosaic of the last 5 years of my life. Every signature on every page was mine. Every bill paid was mine. Every repair, every tax, every upgrade, it was all me. My parents had never contributed a cent. They had lived in the house as if it were their birthright, not something I had broken myself to afford. And I had let them. That was the part that hurt most. Not their entitlement, but my silence. For 20 years I mistook endurance for loyalty. I took a shaky breath and folded the deed back into the folder. A thought flickered across my mind, soft at first, then sharper. What if they didn't have to live there anymore? The thought startled me, not because it was outrageous, but because it was the first time I'd allowed myself to imagine a life where I wasn't their safety net. The idea grew roots quickly, winding through my mind with a dangerous clarity. What if I stopped being the person they expected me to be? What if I stopped letting them live in a place they never respected? What if I chose myself? My phone buzzed, shattering the silence. A message from my mother. A photo appeared. Nadia on the deck of the cruise ship, hair blowing in the breeze, sunglasses perched on her head. She was holding a glass of champagne. My mother's caption followed. She already loves it here. Wish you had come, but you wouldn't enjoy it anyway. Make sure to pay off the card before the due date. Love you. Love you. 2 words she used like plaster to cover over the cracks she caused. I set the phone face down on the table. I didn't want to cry, but my eyes stung anyway. Not from sadness, from relief. Relief that the truth was so clear now I couldn't hide from it even if I wanted to. I took another breath, steadying myself. Then I reached for the laptop. I typed Real Estate Agent Tacoma WA into the search bar. A list appeared, names and faces and numbers I had never needed before. One stood out. Riley Harper, specializing in quick sales. I didn't know her, she didn't know me. But something about the firmness of her expression in the photo made me feel like she wouldn't talk me out of anything, or treat me like a fragile thing that needed to stay exactly where I was. My fingers hovered over the keypad just long enough for doubt to creep in. Was this too extreme? Too abrupt? Too cruel? Then my phone vibrated again. Another message from Nadia this time. Mom says you better pay the credit card fast. We're going shopping tonight. Don't want interest charges, LOL. Interest charges. I felt something inside me calcify. My resolve turned solid. I tapped the number. The phone rang twice. A woman's voice answered crisp and warm. This is Riley. I swallowed the tightness in my throat. Hi, my name is Mara. I have a house I need to sell. Okay, she said without hesitation. Is it owner-occupied or tenant-occupied? Tenant-occupied, I replied. Do they have a lease? No. Are they paying rent? No. There was a pause, but not judgmental, just analytical. So it's your property and they're living there for free. Yes. Riley exhaled slowly. We can work with that. How soon are you hoping to list? I glanced at the cruise photo still on my phone screen. My parents smiling broadly behind Nadia. As soon as possible. Good, Riley replied. Can you meet tomorrow morning? We'll do a walkthrough. Yes, I said. I can. Then I'll see you at 10. When I hung up, the silence felt different. Not oppressive, anticipatory. I sat with the weight of what I had just done. The line had been crossed and the ground behind me was already crumbling. There was no going back to the version of myself who would have apologized for causing discomfort. I wasn't that person anymore. For the first time in my life, I wasn't thinking about what they needed. I wasn't thinking about how they would react. I wasn't thinking about the guilt that had defined my entire relationship with them. I was thinking about me. I cleaned the table, slowly stacking the papers, neatly sliding them back into the folder. My hands weren't shaking. They felt steady, capable. Tomorrow I would walk back into that house. Not as the daughter who gave everything and received nothing, but as the woman who owned it. I didn't know what the next week would bring. Conflict, anger, chaos, probably. But for the first time in years I felt something like hope. A fragile, trembling hope. But hope, nonetheless. And I knew whatever happened next, I was ready for it. The phone started ringing again before I'd even finished setting the folder of house documents back on the table. I didn't want to answer it, not really, but old habits have a way of clawing back into your hands, guiding your fingers before your mind can intervene. I stared at the caller ID, Mom, and for a moment I just stood there, breathing through the dread and something colder than dread. Clarity. I picked up on the fourth ring. "Mara," she said immediately, her tone sharp enough to cut skin. "What was that attitude last night? You were so rude. I don't understand what you're upset about." Her voice carried the same bright, brittle tone she always used when she was about to deliver a lecture disguised as concern. It grated against something inside me that had finally stopped bending. "I'm not upset," I said, and even I could hear how calm I sounded. "I just think we should talk about the charge on my card." "Oh, for heaven's sake, are you still on that?" She let out a theatrical sigh. "You're being dramatic. You make good money, and your sister deserves something nice after her heartbreak." Her heartbreak. Nadia's divorce from a man she'd cheated on twice. A heartbreak she had half orchestrated herself. I let the silence stretch, and my mother, used to filling every pause with her self-congratulating chatter, jumped right back in. "And really, honey, it's not like you travel. You never use that money for anything fun. We thought you'd be happy your card finally did something worthwhile." I closed my eyes. The words were so casual, tossed like crumbs to pigeons. But they were also everything that had defined my place in the family. I was the resource, the backup plan, the provider, not a daughter. "You used my card without permission," I said slowly. "That's not nothing." "Oh, don't take that tone with me," she snapped. "We're your parents, and your father's back is terrible lately. We needed a break, and this cruise was a great deal, but of course you wouldn't understand that because you never—" She cut herself off, but not fast enough. The slip was obvious. "We planned this trip," then quick correction. "I mean, it just came up." I opened my eyes. "You planned it." "No," she said too quickly. "It just happened." "You planned it," I repeated, "and you didn't tell me because you knew I'd say no." "Oh, stop it. Stop making me the villain. This is why you don't get invited to things, Mara. You're always so ungrateful." Ungrateful. The word twisted in my gut, but I didn't let it show. "What else have you used my card for?" I asked quietly. Silence. Then, suddenly, my father's voice boomed through the speaker. "Is this about the stupid trip? Your sister needs this, Mara. She's fragile right now. She's been through a lot. You should be supporting your family instead of nagging about money." I pressed my thumb to my temple. Supporting my family? When have any of you ever supported me? "What does that mean?" my father demanded. "We raised you." "You raised me to take care of everyone but myself." "Oh, don't start with that therapy nonsense," my mother cut in. "You've always been so sensitive. Nadia never acts like this. She's appreciative." "She's appreciative because she's the one getting everything," I said, my voice still steady, still controlled. "She gets the vacations. She gets your money. She gets your praise. And she gets my credit card." "That's unfair," my mother snapped. "Nadia doesn't ask for much." As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a text. I didn't look at it, but the preview banner flashed. "Nadia, send me the card info again, sis. They need it at check-in XOXO." I almost laughed. "I have to go," I said. "Oh, no, you don't," my mother said, her voice sharpening. "Don't you dare hang up." I hung up. The phone rang again immediately. I turned it over and placed it face down on the table. The ringing vibrated against the wood, each buzz reminding me of years of conditioning, years of guilt, years of being the good daughter. But something was different now. The ringing felt distant, like it was happening in another room, another house, another life. When the call finally stopped, the phone went still. The quiet that followed was thick, humming with something electric. Another text came through. "Nadia, don't ruin the trip for Mom. She deserves this." I picked up the phone and stared at the message. No apology, no acknowledgement, just entitlement dressed up as sisterly advice. Memories began resurfacing one by one, like someone was pulling open dusty drawers inside my chest. The year I made the honor roll and came home glowing with pride, only to find my parents too busy cooing over Nadia's participation ribbon. The time I saved for months to buy my bicycle, only to have it handed to Nadia after she cried for 10 minutes. The countless birthdays where I got a candle and Nadia got a cake. The years of working 2 jobs through college while Nadia's tuition was paid in full. The day my parents walked into my new home as if they owned it. And now, $11,000 disappearing into a vacation I wasn't invited to. This wasn't a one-time betrayal, it was a lifelong pattern. I stood up and walked toward the window. Outside, the morning light had shifted. Shadows stretched long and thin across the parking lot, like the past trying to claim space where it no longer belonged. It was time to stop pretending. I took the last sip of cold coffee and put the mug in the sink. My phone buzzed again, another message lighting up the screen. My mother, this time. Mom, don't make things difficult. We're family. What's yours is ours. The words hit me the way a final puzzle piece clicks into place. What's yours is ours. They believed that, deeply, fully, without question. And for the first time, I didn't feel hurt. I felt free. Because nothing was more clarifying than hearing the truth spoken so plainly. I picked up the folder of house documents again, flipping through the pages until I found the property tax records. There was a bill from 2 months ago that hadn't been paid on time. The system had auto-drafted the balance from my bank account. My mother had never mentioned it. Of course she hadn't. I checked the maintenance receipts next. When the water heater broke last winter, I'd paid $600 for repairs. When the roof needed patching, that was another condon $200. All me. Every page was a ledger of my role in the family dynamic. Provider, fixer, silent backbone. The longer I looked at the papers, the clearer one thought became. They think this house is theirs. They forgot who bought it. They forgot whose name is on every line. They forgot, but I didn't. My phone buzzed again. A photo from Nadia, her lying on a deck chair in a designer bikini with the caption, "Already upgraded to the premium drinks package. Thanks, sis." Something inside me hardened. Not anger, not bitterness. Something colder, cleaner. Enough. I walked to the balcony and stepped outside. The crisp morning air hit my skin, waking something dormant inside me. The world looked different, not because it had changed, but because I finally had. The decision settled over me like snow, quiet and final. I wasn't going to ask them to pay me back. I wasn't going to beg for respect. I wasn't going to argue or explain or justify. I was going to take back what was mine. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Nadia. Nadia. Sis, you there? We need the card for the spa add-on. I turned the phone off. Not silent mode. Off. I walked back inside, grabbed my wallet and keys, and took one last look around my apartment. A place that had always felt temporary, a holding space for a version of me that no longer existed. Tomorrow I would walk into that house with a real estate agent. I would stand in the living room my parents had claimed as their own. I would walk through every room they'd filled with their belongings, and I would reclaim the space they'd stolen from me. For the first time, the future didn't terrify me. For the first time, I wasn't walking toward them. I was walking away. And it felt like the first honest breath I'd taken in years. I woke before my alarm, the room still dim, the air cool enough that I pulled the blanket up for a moment just to feel something warm against my skin. But the warmth didn't last. There was a strange clarity in my chest, a quiet resolve I couldn't shake off. It felt like waking up on the morning of an exam you know you're finally ready for. Not excited, not scared, just prepared. My mind wasn't spinning. My stomach wasn't knotted. That alone told me how much I had changed overnight. I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen and the occasional passing car. The little apartment I'd retreated to years ago had always felt like a hiding place, a temporary cave I crawled into so my parents wouldn't complain about being disturbed by my life. But this morning, it felt like the command center of a woman who finally understood what she needed to do. I pushed the blanket back and sat up, the cold air brushing against my arms. No hesitation, no shaking hands, just motion. My feet touched the floor with a sense of purpose I couldn't remember ever feeling. I wasn't going to work today. I wasn't going to pretend nothing happened. I wasn't going to carry my family like dead weight on my back anymore. I made coffee, but this time I didn't sip it slowly. I drank with focus, standing at the counter, watching the sunlight crawl slowly across the wall. It wasn't warmth I needed this morning, it was clarity, and clarity felt like cold metal in my hands. I sat down at the table and opened the folder again, the one with the deed, the tax records, the maintenance receipts, papers that told the story my family always pretended didn't exist. Every page a confession, not mine but theirs, of entitlement, of exploitation, of taking and taking until there was almost nothing left. The deed. My name, my house, not theirs. Never theirs. My parents had lived in that house for 5 years without paying a cent. No rent, no utilities, not even groceries half the time. They moved in temporarily, and like everything else in my life, temporary became permanent as long as it benefited them. My father's back, my mother's guilt-soaked monologues, Nadia's need for quiet space after hard days. Everything was a reason I must continue paying so they didn't have to. I traced my finger over the printed line. Owner, Mara Jensen. The ownership felt like a myth until today. Today, it felt like a weapon. I reached for my laptop and opened the tabs I'd bookmarked last night. Laws on homeowner rights, articles on selling owner-occupied homes, forums where people shared stories of family members who overstayed, who expected everything, who demanded gratitude for taking advantage. I wasn't alone. That mattered more than I expected. I called a local law office first. A woman answered, her voice smooth and precise. I have a question about selling a house, I said. It's mine, but other people are living in it. Are they tenants? No. Do they pay rent? No. Do they have a written agreement to stay there? No. There was a noticeable pause. Then legally you are free to sell. You are the sole owner. What about them? I asked. They would have no legal right to stop a sale. You're not required to notify them prior to listing unless they have a lease. No lease, I repeated. No payments. Nothing. Then the law is on your side. She said it so simply, but the words rang in my ears like a bell. On my side. The law was on my side. Something inside my chest loosened. I thanked her and hung up. Then I pulled my phone closer and scrolled until I found the number from last night. Riley. I didn't hesitate. I dialed. She picked up on the second ring. This is Riley. Hi, it's Mara. I'd like to move forward with the sale. Her tone shifted instantly to business. Steady, no nonsense. Great. I can meet you at the property tomorrow at 10. Bring any documents you have. I will. You okay? She asked. Not nosy, just perceptive. Yes, I said, surprised by how true it felt. I am. When I hung up, I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. A notification pinged on my phone. My mother had sent a message. Mom, we're boarding the ship now. Your father's back is bothering him, but he's pushing through. Wish you were coming with us. I stared at the photo attached. Nadia posed dramatically in their cabin, champagne in hand. My father grinning in the background. My mother looking thrilled, not a shadow of remorse on any of their faces. Not a hint that they even considered they'd done something wrong. They were 3 people who thought the world existed to cushion them. My mother added another message. Make sure to pay your card. It helps your credit score, you know. Be responsible. Responsible. They'd used that word my whole life as if it were synonymous with unpaid labor. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened the cabinet above the refrigerator and pulled down the accordion file where I kept older financial statements. I sat cross-legged on the carpet and emptied it out. Bills, bank statements, maintenance logs, they fanned out like the scattered pieces of a life I had spent covering for everyone else. A property tax bill from last year I'd forgotten about. They'd never even thanked me. A plumbing repair receipt for $350. A note from the repairman saying, "Parents said fix immediately." A grocery receipt where my mother bought champagne, steak, imported cheese on my card while telling me I needed to budget better. These were the smaller thefts, the everyday ones. Death by 1,000 cuts. But my hand stilled when I found something else. An email printed out, forwarded long ago from a neighbor. It said, "Your parents said you gifted them the house. That's wonderful. Gifted." I felt something in my chest crack, but not in the painful way. More like an eggshell breaking open, letting something new breathe. They believed the lie they'd told so often they forgot it wasn't true. I gathered everything slowly, deliberately, and put it back into the folder. Not because I needed the proof, but because I wanted to see the reality laid out clearly. They had built a life on top of me, and I was finally done being the foundation. Around noon, I went to the grocery store for no particular reason other than I needed to walk. The air outside was crisp, and the sky had that pale winter brightness that made everything feel sharper. I moved down the aisles in a daze, picking up fruit, bread, milk, things I needed but barely tasted in my mind. I paused near the floral section, staring at a bouquet of white lilies. My mother loved lilies. I walked past them. When I got home, the sun had shifted, casting long shadows across my living room floor. I sat down again at the kitchen table and opened my laptop to reread Riley's profile. Her picture showed a woman with pulled-back hair, sharp eyes, and no forced smile. Someone who looked like she'd seen messy situations and walked people through them without blinking. Someone who wasn't afraid of people like my mother, tomorrow at 10. I kept repeating it in my mind. Tomorrow I would walk through my own house, my house, with a real estate agent. Tomorrow I would stand in rooms my parents had claimed and finally see them through different eyes. My phone buzzed, a text from Nadia this time. "Sis, please tell me you paid the credit card. We're trying to book a spa thing. Don't be difficult. Don't be difficult." The same line she had used since we were kids. When she wanted a toy, when she wanted my shirt, when she wanted my car, when she wanted me to be small so she could be big. I locked the phone and set it aside. It vibrated again immediately, but I ignored it. I wouldn't be baited anymore. I made dinner, just pasta with butter and herbs. But even that felt symbolic. I ate in silence, savoring the simplicity. No criticism, no commentary, no guilt, just me in the quiet and a future I could almost touch. After washing the dishes, I stepped onto the balcony again. The evening air was cold enough to sting my cheeks, but I didn't retreat. I stayed there, leaning on the railing, looking up at a sky full of fading blues and creeping darkness. My parents were probably somewhere warm and loud and overflowing with food they didn't pay for. They were probably laughing. They were probably taking pictures and drinking sparkling wine and telling strangers about the daughter who took care of everything. But I wasn't that daughter anymore. I stayed on the balcony until the cold began to sink deeper into my skin. Then I went back inside and sat on the couch with a blanket wrapped around me. I watched the shadows grow across the ceiling until the room was nearly dark. Tomorrow was the line in the sand. I wasn't afraid to cross it. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel fear at all. I felt free. Riley arrived exactly on time. A silver sedan pulling into the driveway of the house I had bought at 27. The house my parents had taken over before the paint on the walls had even fully dried. I parked behind her, gripping the steering wheel for one last steadying breath before stepping out. The morning was cold, the kind of cold that made your breath look like it was trying to escape your body. Appropriate, I supposed. Something inside me had been trying to escape for years. Riley stood beside her car, tablet in hand, dressed in a dark coat and boots practical enough for navigating any terrain. She gave me a nod. "You ready?" Her tone wasn't condescending. It wasn't overly soft. It was matter-of-fact in a way that steadied me. I nodded back. "Yes." We walked toward the house together. From the outside it looked perfect. White siding, clean windows, trimmed shrubs my parents always boasted about maintaining, though I had been the one to pay the landscaping bill every spring. The wreath on the door was new, something floral pastel, completely unlike anything I would ever choose. A small irritation flared in me. They had changed the wreath again without asking. Something so small but so entirely symbolic of everything else. "This is it?" Riley asked, surveying the porch. It is, I said, and my voice didn't shake. She tested the railing, glanced at the porch boards, then reached for the doorknob. You said they're out of town. Yes. Good. Let's take our time. I knew she was trying to reassure me, but it still felt surreal to hear someone else treat this house as if it belonged to me, as if she believed it too easily, too naturally, when my family had spent years convincing me that ownership didn't matter. The doorknob clicked under her hand, and the door swung open. The smell hit me first. My mother's lavender room spray, heavy, overwhelming, perfumed ownership. The house was spotless, not because they respected it, but because my mother treated cleanliness like a performance, a way to prove she was better than other women. Riley stepped inside and paused, taking everything in. It's well maintained, she said. Maintained. As if it had happened magically. I swallowed the bitterness that rose in my throat. I paid for a cleaning service every month, I said. They didn't know. Riley's eyes flicked to me, not pity, understanding. We moved deeper into the house. The living room looked like a catalog image of someone else's life. Framed photos of Nadia in her prom dress, Nadia graduating, Nadia at her wedding, Nadia's face everywhere. I scanned the room automatically, looking for any photo of me. There was one tucked behind a plant on a side table, half hidden from a family barbecue 10 years ago. In the picture, I wasn't even looking at the camera. My mother had probably placed it there only because she thought having no pictures of me at all would seem strange. You okay? Riley asked quietly. I let my fingers brush the edge of the hidden frame. I'm fine. But we both knew that wasn't quite true. We moved toward what had once been my bedroom. The door was cracked open. I pushed it gently. It wasn't a bedroom anymore. It was Nadia's dressing room. My sister's shoes lined up on the shelves my father had installed. Dresses hanging in neat rows. Makeup spread across the vanity. A mirror lined in bulbs, like she was a star getting ready for a show she didn't even need to audition for. Everything I had once owned was gone. Not boxed, not stored. Gone. I felt my jaw clench. This used to be my room. Riley didn't say anything. She didn't have to. The silence itself was respect. We walked through the hallway toward the larger bedroom. What should have been mine? The door was closed. Riley opened it for me. My parents' room. My mother's jewelry box sat open on the dresser, necklaces spilling out in tangled gold and silver chains. My father's slippers on the floor, a stack of folded laundry, a half-finished mug of tea on the nightstand. A room lived in. Claimed. Mine in name only. I stepped inside slowly, like someone entering a stranger's home. The air felt heavy, humid with their presence. I remembered how many times my mother had told me she needed this room because of my father's back, because of their age, because of anything she could think of to justify taking space I had built for myself. They really settled in, Riley murmured. Settled. That was a generous word. They had colonized. I inhaled deeply, letting anger rise but not overflow. Anger had always been dangerous in this house, something I wasn't allowed to show. But today it felt clean, clarifying, controlled. We stepped back into the hallway and Riley tapped her tablet. The layout is solid. Natural light is great. Buyers are going to love this. Buyers. The word made something stir in me, something bright and fierce. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one being taken from. I was choosing what stayed and what went. In the kitchen, Riley opened cabinets, checked appliances, made notes. I stood near the counter, touching the cool edge of the quartz I'd paid for 2 years ago after the old laminate had started peeling. My mother had chosen the new color, not me. There were new dishes, too, mugs with cheesy quotes about gratitude and family. I stared at one that read, "Family is everything." The irony was so thick it almost made me laugh. There are a lot of personal items, Riley said gently. But that's normal. They're not mine, I said. Nothing here is mine. She paused. Do you want to take anything with you before listing? No, I said. And I meant it. This house hasn't been mine for years. We stepped out into the backyard. The pergola my parents had added stood over the patio, freshly stained and decorated with string lights. It was beautiful, but not the kind of beautiful that came from love or effort. The kind built from someone else's wallet. I walked toward the mailbox out of habit, opening the metal door even though I didn't live here anymore. Inside was a bill from the hardware store, a pergola purchase, $499, charged to me. I handed the envelope to Riley without a word. She skimmed it and nodded slowly. "People take advantage of kindness," she said. "It's more common than you think." I stared at the pergola. They planned to stay here forever. "Not anymore," Riley said. "If you're ready, we can list tomorrow." I thought of my mother's laughter, my father's entitlement, Nadia's champagne selfies, the $11,000 they'd taken without hesitation, the decades of taking before that, the rooms filled with everything but me. I thought of the girl who had moved into this house 5 years ago, excited, hopeful, proud. I thought of the woman I had become, hunched and quiet and small so they could take up all the space. I straightened. "List it." Riley smiled, a small approving curve of her mouth. "Then we're moving forward." On the way back through the house, she snapped a few photos with her phone for preliminary notes. I lingered in the living room, looking at the pictures on the wall. So many images of Nadia. My parents, vacations I hadn't been invited to, holidays I'd paid for but never truly belonged to. It was like looking at a museum exhibit dedicated to a family I had never been a part of. I lifted the one photo of me, the hidden one, off the table. I slipped it into my bag. Not because I wanted the memory, but because it was the only proof I'd ever existed in this house. As we reached the front door, Riley said, "I'll send you the paperwork tonight, but just so you know, this is a seller's market. Your home will move fast." Good, I thought. Let it move faster than they ever expected. We stepped outside. The cold air hit my face again. This time it felt like permission. As Riley walked to her car, I stood on the porch for a long moment, looking at the house that had swallowed me whole. I remembered cooking dinner in its kitchen while my parents criticized my seasoning. I remembered washing dishes while Nadia lounged on the couch. I remembered being told to be quiet, to be respectful, to understand, to give more, to expect nothing. Not anymore. I locked the door behind me, not to keep anything in, but to keep everything out. My phone buzzed as I walked down the driveway. A new message from my mother. "Having the best time on the ship. Don't forget to pay the card. Nadia wants the spa package tonight." I stared at the words for a long, long moment. Then I put my phone in my pocket, opened my car door, and drove away from the house that had never loved me back. And for the first time, I didn't look back. The photos kept coming. One after another, like my mother and sister were determined to document every angle of their luxury cruise and funnel it straight into my phone. I didn't open most of them. The preview alone was enough. Nadia pouting in oversized sunglasses, my mother posing with a cocktail, my father pretending his back didn't miraculously stop hurting when he stepped onto a Caribbean ship. It was the same family performance they'd perfected for decades. Everything is wonderful as long as someone else is paying. I sat at my kitchen table, the sunlight barely warming the room, and turned my phone face down. Not to silence the notifications, they'd still come, but to silence the reflex in me that wanted to respond, to soothe, to engage, to be the daughter they expected. I wasn't that daughter anymore. I could still feel the imprint of the house keys in my purse, like a reminder burning through the fabric. The listing would go up tomorrow. The decision was real, irreversible. And the quiet in my apartment felt different today, not like loneliness, but like possibility. The phone buzzed again. I didn't reach for it. I didn't need to. I already knew the tone my mother would use, the half-sweet guilt, the half-sharp entitlement. Instead, I opened my laptop, fingers hovering over the trackpad. Riley had messaged me late last night. "Photos are done. Listing ready to publish at 9 a.m. tomorrow." I reread the message 4 times. Each time it felt more solid, more like a life I was finally walking into rather than one I was running from. My phone buzzed again, a faster, more insistent vibration. I sighed and flipped it over. Nadia, look! We upgraded to the premium drinks package. Mom says it's your turn to treat us after how stressful things have been. I stared at the photo she'd attached. Nadia reclined on a lounge chair, the ocean sparkling behind her. She looked carefree, radiant, absolutely unbothered by the fact she was burning through money that didn't belong to her. My mother stood behind her holding 2 glasses of champagne, the kind that probably cost more than my weekly grocery bill. I pressed the lock button slowly. Not my responsibility, I whispered, and the words felt strange but good. My coffee had gone cold. I poured it out and made another, more out of ritual than need. The day felt long already, thick with choices I couldn't take back. I leaned against the counter, listening to the quiet hum of the refrigerator, the faint ticking of the clock on the wall, the life that was finally beginning to settle into its own rhythm. Then my phone buzzed again. Mom, hope you're not being moody today. We're having a lovely time. Make sure the card is paid. Don't let it damage your credit score. I actually laughed, a sharp, humorless laugh that echoed in my kitchen. Damage my credit score. They were on a cruise I paid for without permission, and they were worried about my credit score, worried only because it affected them, because they intended to keep spending. I sat down at the table and pulled up my email. The credit card company had sent a message 2 hours earlier. Fraud claim status update. I hadn't opened it yet. My fingers trembled just a little as I clicked. Your claim has been received. Temporary credit issued while investigation proceeds. I exhaled slowly. It wasn't final, but it was a beginning. A beginning where I wasn't passively absorbing consequences for choices I didn't make. The doorbell rang. My heart jolted, but when I checked the peephole, it was just a delivery driver dropping off a package for a neighbor. Still, the moment shook me, not because of who was at the door, but because of who I expected to see. My mother standing there demanding explanations. Nadia in tears, my father furious about being inconvenienced. They weren't here. They were hundreds of miles away, living like royalty on my money. They had no idea the ground was shifting beneath them. And tomorrow, when the listing went live, the shift would turn into a landslide. I sat back at the table and opened my budgeting app. For years, every line item reflected a life structured around supporting theirs. Utilities for the house, groceries for the house, repairs for the house, taxes for the house. My life had been a footnote in my own financial plan. Not anymore. My phone buzzed again. I almost ignored it, but then I saw the name. Riley. I answered immediately. Hey Mara, she said, brisk but friendly. I have updates. I straightened. Okay. I sent you the finalized listing details. We're set for 9 tomorrow morning. I also reached out to 2 investors I work with. They're already interested. Quick closings, cash offers, no inspection drama. That fast? I asked. She chuckled softly. Your neighborhood is hot right now. Homes like yours? They go fast. Honestly, once the listing is up, you might have offers by the afternoon. I gripped the phone tighter. Offers by the afternoon. My parents lounging under tropical sun while their home, my home, passed legally out of their reach. The thought didn't feel vindictive. It felt just. Also, Riley continued, just to confirm, your parents don't know anything about the sale? No, I said, and I don't plan to tell them. Good, she said, not judgmental, simply factual. Less friction that way. When the call ended, I sat in silence again, the kind of silence that wrapped around me like a blanket instead of a chokehold. Another buzz. Mom, we're trying the seafood tasting tonight. You'd hate it. Too many flavors you can't pronounce. LOL. Another followed immediately. Mom, also, Nadia wants to book a massage. Let us know when you pay the card. Let us know. As if it were an errand I was supposed to complete for them. A chore on a list, a duty. My fingers tightened around the phone until my knuckles whitened. I didn't reply. The hours drifted by in a strange, suspended haze. I cleaned a little, folded laundry, reorganized a drawer I rarely opened. The tasks weren't necessary, but they helped settle the restlessness thrumming under my skin. Every so often my phone buzzed again. More cruise photos, more demands, more entitlement wrapped in emojis. Around 4 in the afternoon I finally turned my phone completely off. Not silent, not do not disturb, off. The quiet that followed wasn't empty, it was alive. The air felt clearer. My thoughts felt louder in a way that made sense. I took a walk around the block, breathing in cool air that smelled faintly of pine and cold pavement. Kids rode their bikes past me. A dog tugged its owner toward a patch of melting snow. People lived their lives without needing anything from me, without pulling on me, without draining me. When I got home, the apartment felt warmer somehow. Held, safe. Tomorrow, the listing would go live. Tomorrow, the world would begin to shift. I made dinner, a simple stir-fry, and ate it slowly, savoring each bite. No criticism, no commentary, no expectations. Just food and quiet, and the awareness that this piece was mine, and mine alone. As the sky darkened, I stepped out onto the balcony. The air nipped at my cheeks. Lights flickered in neighboring buildings. Somewhere in the distance, a train horn sounded. I imagined my parents at that exact moment, maybe sipping cocktails by a glowing pool, maybe arguing with cruise staff over seat assignments, maybe obliviously enjoying themselves while the walls of their comfortable life shifted in ways they wouldn't understand until they returned. Tomorrow at 9, the listing, the first domino. I leaned my hands on the railing and closed my eyes. They think everything is theirs, I whispered into the cold air. But this is mine. When I opened my eyes again, the city lights blurred slightly. Not from sadness, from relief. This was the last night before everything changed. And for the first time, change didn't terrify me. It thrilled me. I woke before sunrise, the sky still a deep navy blue, the city outside my window barely stirring. Today felt different from the moment I opened my eyes. Not heavy, not anxious, just sharp. As if every nerve in my body had decided to finally agree on one thing. It was time. Time to move. Time to end this. Time to choose myself without apologizing for it. I made coffee but barely tasted it. The quiet in the apartment was almost rhythmic, like a heartbeat syncing me to the moment that was coming. I showered, dressed, tied my hair back, and sat at the small kitchen table with my laptop open in front of me. The clock blinked 8:57 a.m., 3 minutes. My palms were warm but steady. My breath slow. My hands no longer trembled the way they used to whenever I anticipated my family's reaction to anything. This moment had nothing to do with them. I refreshed the screen. 8:58. I heard a sound outside. A truck rolling down the street, early commuters heading to work. Life happening, indifferent to what was about to unfold in mine. 8:59. My phone buzzed with a notification I ignored. 9. The listing went live. A single line of text appeared at the top of the page. Your property is now active. I stared at it, letting the words fill me, settle in me, expand inside me until I felt taller somehow. Lighter. Stronger than I had an hour ago. Stronger than I had ever been in that house my parents had claimed for themselves. By 9:04, Riley called. You're officially on the market, she said, her voice bright with satisfaction. Congrats, Mara. I exhaled. Thank you. You'll want to stay close to your phone today, she continued. This neighborhood hasn't had a new listing in weeks. There are buyers watching it. Okay. And, Mara, she added, whatever happens today, it's going to be fast. I nodded even though she couldn't see me. I'm ready. After I hung up, I set my phone next to my laptop and refreshed the page again. Views were already ticking upward. 5 people, 9, 14, 22. It was surreal. Watching strangers look at photos of a house that had never really felt like mine, while the people who'd smothered the life out of it weren't even in the same state to see it happening. At 9:17, the first inquiry came in. At 9:24, the second. By 9:30, I had 3 notifications from interested buyers. I pressed a hand to my sternum. My heart wasn't racing. It was building, rising like a wave about to crest. I walked to the balcony and opened the sliding door to let in the cold March air. It hit my face like clarity, shocking and invigorating. I breathed deeply, letting the tension roll off me. I wasn't doing anything wrong. I wasn't betraying anyone. I was reclaiming what was mine. At 10:03, Riley called again. 2 offers, she said. 1 cash, 1 conventional loan with a strong approval letter. My breath hitched. Already? Already, she repeated with a small laugh. And I'm expecting at least 1 more today. People love that layout. And the updates you've made, they add real value. The updates they never paid for. The updates my parents criticized me for spending money on. The updates they insisted they deserved. Can you meet later to review them? Riley asked. Yes, anytime. I hung up and leaned both hands on the table, grounding myself. I felt my phone buzzing under my palm again. Not Riley this time. Mom, we're trying the breakfast buffet. You'd hate the eggs here, too fancy for your taste. Another one arrived immediately. Mom, also, your father wants to book an excursion and it's filling up fast. Please answer your phone. Then another. Nadia, Mom said you're being moody. Can you just pay the card like a normal person? Normal person. Their normal had strangled me for years. I set the phone aside. At noon, I walked to a cafe a few blocks away, needing fresh air that wasn't thick with old memories. I ordered soup and sat by the window with my laptop open again. A notification popped up. Offer number 3, all cash, above asking. I blinked at the number. It was more than I had hoped for, more than I had believed possible. Enough to pay everything off, enough to start fresh, enough to finally build a life without guilt sewn into every corner. My phone buzzed again. I ignored it. Halfway through my soup, Riley texted, "Call me when you can. We need to choose which offer to accept." I stepped outside into the weak winter sun and dialed her. "Okay," she said without preamble. "We've got 3 offers. The all-cash one from the Marshalls looks solid. Newlyweds, ready to close immediately. They loved the house." I closed my eyes at the softness in her voice when she described them. Newlyweds, starting a life, not taking advantage, not entitled, not cruel. "What about the others?" I asked. "1 investor, 1 rental company, both fine, but I think the couple is the best match if you're looking for a quick and clean close." Quick and clean, exactly what I needed. "Let's go with them," I said. "Done." Her voice warmed. "Mara, you're making a good decision." The words lingered after she hung up. They felt like a balm I didn't know I needed. On the walk home, everything felt different. The trees, the sidewalks, even the cold air. As if the world had shifted a fraction of an inch and suddenly aligned with me instead of against me. At home, I pulled up the cruise line website and stared at the rotating images of Alaska. Snow-capped mountains, icy blue waters, whales breaching the surface. A trip I had never imagined taking. A world far from the suffocating orbit of my family. Without hesitating, I clicked Book Now. I chose a balcony cabin, upgraded package, everything included. I didn't open a budgeting app, didn't check the price twice. I just chose it because I wanted it. When I reached the payment screen, I felt a ripple of dark amusement. My credit card rewards balance, bloated from my parents' unauthorized charge, covered a massive portion of the trip. I used them, a full-circle irony that didn't feel petty, just poetic. After confirming the booking, I sat back and let out a slow breath. It felt like exhaling years of weight. The confirmation email arrived with the subject line, "Your adventure awaits." My adventure, mine. At 4:12 p.m., Riley emailed, "Congratulations! Buyers accepted your counter. Closing scheduled for Friday." Friday, 2 days before my parents returned. I stared at the screen, letting the reality settle. By the time they came home from their luxurious vacation, dragging their suitcases up the walkway, laughing about trivial inconveniences, they would find strangers living in the house they believed belonged to them, and I wouldn't be there to explain it. Because explanations were for people who listened, and my family never had. My phone buzzed against the table again. I didn't need to check it to know who it was. Mom, we're going to dinner soon. Try not to stress yourself out. You always overthink everything. Love you. Remember the card. I powered the phone off. This time it felt like setting down a heavy box I'd carried for too long. Later that evening, I walked to the balcony again, watching the last sliver of daylight sink behind the rooftops. I wrapped my sweater tighter around me, breathing in the cold. I thought about the little girl I'd been. The one who got in trouble for wanting attention, for wanting fairness, for wanting anything. The teenager who worked double shifts while her sister vacationed guilt-free. The young woman who handed over her house, her income, her sanity in exchange for a love that never materialized. She had survived. Barely, quietly. But she was done surviving. She was starting. As I watched the lights flick on in the neighborhood houses, I felt something open in my chest. Not hope, exactly. Something fiercer. Something that tasted like freedom. Something I didn't have a name for yet. But I would. Soon. Tomorrow the papers would be signed. Tomorrow the house would no longer be theirs to take from. Tomorrow the past would begin to release its grip on me. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of the future. I was walking toward it. The night before the closing felt strangely calm, as if my mind had finally exhausted every reserve of fear and guilt and left nothing behind but clean, steady intention. I didn't toss or turn. I didn't overthink. I lay in bed listening to the hum of the heater, the soft creak of the building settling, the quiet rhythm of my own breath. For once, nothing inside me fought the moment I was in. Nothing tried to drag me backward into the familiar chaos of my family's expectations. When morning broke, I got up before the alarm rang. Outside, the sky was a soft gray, swollen with the promise of rain. I brushed my hair, made coffee, and packed my bag with the documents Riley told me to bring. Each movement was deliberate, grounded, like I was rehearsing the steps of a ritual meant to release me from an old life. My phone remained off. I didn't want to see any last-minute photos from the cruise. I didn't want to read any more instructions from my mother disguised as affection. Today wasn't about them. It was about severing a tie that had drained me for 3 decades. At 9:30, I left my apartment and drove toward the title office. The closer I got, the more surreal it felt. Not frightening, just surreal. Like walking into a version of myself I'd never been allowed to meet until now. Riley was already there when I arrived. She stood outside the glass doors, clipboard in hand, coat buttoned to the neck. When she saw me, she gave a small, warm smile that didn't require anything from me but my presence. "You ready?" she asked. "Yes," I said, and I meant it. We walked into the building together. Inside, the lobby was quiet except for a receptionist typing at her desk and the faint buzz of a fluorescent light overhead. The closing room was down a short hallway, a simple office with a large wooden table, neatly stacked papers, and a pot of coffee someone had brewed hours ago. The buyers arrived a few minutes later, Jonah and Elise. Newly married, cheeks flushed from the cold, eyes bright with excitement. They looked like the kind of couple I once believed I'd become someday. Hopeful, intentional, ready to build something meaningful together. "Thank you for doing a quick turnaround," Elise said, shaking my hand. Her voice was soft but earnest. "We just really love the house." Jonah nodded beside her. "It's perfect for us." I felt the last of my anxiety loosen. The house would be lived in by people who wanted it, who would fill it with something other than entitlement and resentment, people who saw a home instead of a resource to drain. "It's a good house," I said. "I'm glad it's going to someone who'll appreciate it." We sat down. The title officer entered, and the signing began. A flurry of explanations, signatures, initials, confirmations, acknowledgments, legal language and stamped papers, and a pen that glided too smoothly across each page. At one point I paused, the deed transfer in front of me, my name at the top, their names below, a symbolic line being crossed. I signed. When the buyers added their signatures, the room shifted, like a held breath finally exhaled. "That's it," the title officer said with a small smile. "The property is officially transferred." Riley turned to me. "Congratulations, you're done. Done." The word hit me deep in the center of my chest, not empty, not hollow, full of something bright, hard, and liberating. The buyers thanked me again, their gratitude sincere, warm. Then they left, hand in hand, ready to step into the life ahead of them. When they were gone, I stayed seated for a moment, letting the quiet settle around me. "How do you feel?" Riley asked. I didn't answer immediately. I looked at the table, at the spot where the deed had sat, where the last physical tie to my parents' version of my life had been severed. "I feel free," I said finally, for the first time in a long time. Riley nodded, understanding without needing details. "You made the right call." We walked out together. The morning had shifted from gray to a clean, soft light, the air crisp against my cheeks. The rain that had threatened earlier hadn't come after all. Maybe symbolic, maybe coincidence. But I took the clear sky as a sign anyway. Back in my car, I sat for a moment before starting the engine. The world felt quieter somehow. Not muted, just calmer. As if the noise that had filled the background of my life for years had finally been silenced. When I got home, I placed the closing folder on the table and stared at it. So small, so unassuming. Yet it represented the heaviest weight I'd ever carried, and the moment I finally set it down. I turned my phone on. The screen lit up instantly with a tidal wave of notifications. 39 missed calls, 17 voicemails, 26 texts, a few from numbers I didn't recognize, likely the hotel or airport trying to reach me on my parents' behalf. But most were from them. Mom, Dad, Nadia. The surge of messages didn't make my stomach twist the way it once would have. They didn't make my heart speed up. They didn't fill me with dread. I opened none of them. Instead, I went straight to settings and blocked all 3 of their numbers. The silence that followed wasn't cruel. It wasn't rage. It was peace. I closed my eyes and let the calm settle over me, grounding me from the inside out. I spent the rest of the morning cleaning my apartment, not in the frantic, compulsive way I had once cleaned to earn my mother's approval, but slowly, thoughtfully, making space, preparing, choosing what mattered. I tossed old takeout menus, donated clothes I no longer wore, organized my bookshelves. Every item I kept was intentional. Every item I let go of lightened the room a little more. Around 2 in the afternoon, I opened my email. The cruise confirmation glowed on the screen. Departure in 3 days. Balcony cabin, glacier excursions. The kind of trip I'd once only dreamed about, but never allowed myself to take. I clicked through the itinerary, imagining myself on a ship that didn't drain me, imagining silence unbroken by demands, imagining standing on a deck with icy wind on my face and no one beside me telling me who I needed to be. For the first time, the thought of traveling alone didn't scare me. It thrilled me. I closed the laptop and pulled out a suitcase. A small one. Enough for a week-long escape into a world that had never been mine before. As I folded sweaters and tucked in gloves, I caught my reflection in the mirror. Not the version of me my parents saw, not the version that bent, apologized, absorbed, sacrificed. This woman looked steady, certain, quietly powerful. A knock sounded at my door. I froze. 3 gentle knocks. Then silence. My chest tightened for just a moment, a reflex, not fear. I stepped toward the peephole and peered through. A delivery driver, a small package at his feet. I exhaled and opened the door. "Package for Mara," he said with a polite smile. "Thank you." After I'd closed the door again, I looked at the box. I hadn't ordered anything. There was no return address. But inside, wrapped in simple tissue paper, was a leather-bound journal. No note, just the journal. Blank pages waiting for a story I hadn't written yet. I didn't know who sent it. Maybe a mistake, maybe meant for the previous tenant. But I kept it. It felt right to keep it. I set it on the nightstand next to my suitcase. A symbol. A beginning. When evening fell, I stepped outside again. The cold air brushed against my skin, grounding me. The city lights flickered on, one by one, illuminating streets I hadn't explored yet. That was the thing about freedom. It didn't always come with fireworks. Sometimes it arrived quietly, softly, in small moments layered on top of each other until, suddenly, you realized you could breathe. Tonight, I could breathe. Tomorrow, I would keep breathing. In 3 days, I would stand at the edge of the world, Alaska's icy ridges rising before me, alone, unburdened, whole. The house was gone, the debt was gone, the chains were gone. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I had stepped fully into the person I was always meant to be. Their ship docked at 7:42 on a bright Sunday morning. I knew that not because they told me, my phone was still blocked, still silent, but because I had tracked the cruise schedule the way someone might track a storm moving toward land. Predictable, inevitable, and absolutely incapable of doing real damage, as long as you stayed out of its path. I was in the middle of packing the last items into my suitcase, thermal leggings, gloves, a scarf thick enough for Alaskan wind, when the first call came through my hotel's front desk line. Not my cell, my hotel line. It rang once, then twice. A hesitant, almost apologetic sound, as if even the phone understood it was carrying something I no longer owed my attention. I didn't answer. But a minute later, my room phone rang again. This time, the front desk clerk's voice followed. "Ms. Jensen, I just wanted to let you know, there are a few people in the lobby asking for you. They're, insisting." My pulse didn't spike. It didn't even flutter. I simply let out a long, steady breath. "Can you describe them?" I asked. A middle-aged man and woman, both looking, well, very upset. And a younger woman, too. They said it was urgent. Of course they did. Everything was always urgent when they needed me. "Please tell them I'm unavailable," I said calmly. "I won't be meeting with them." The clerk hesitated. "Are you sure?" "I am." "All right, Ms. Jensen." When I hung up, I didn't move for a moment. I just stood there with my hand resting lightly on the phone, waiting for a reaction that didn't come. No panic, no guilt, just clarity, like a clean wind blowing through a room that had been sealed shut for years. A moment later, the hotel line rang again. I didn't touch it. The ringing went on, insistent but powerless, like someone pounding on a locked door from the outside while I stood behind reinforced glass. I zipped up my suitcase. The ringing stopped. 3 seconds later, my cell phone, though still blocked, buzzed with a notification from my voicemail app. They had left a message. I didn't listen to it. Not yet. Instead, I turned my phone completely off and placed it inside my purse. Not hidden, not avoided, just irrelevant. When I stepped into the elevator, the doors closing felt symbolic, almost theatrical. A soft, final movement separating past from present. The lobby was quiet except for a faint hum of forced whispers. My parents and Nadia stood near the vending machine, huddled together like they were bracing against a storm only they could feel. My mother's makeup was smeared. My father looked red-faced. Nadia looked furious in that wild, indignant way she had perfected at age 5 and never stopped practicing. Their heads snapped toward me the second I appeared. My mother rushed forward first, eyes wide. "Mara, how could you?" But she didn't get to finish. The elevator doors closed between us, sealing me inside a quiet metal box. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel cruelty. I felt ease, like I had slipped out of a too-tight coat I'd been forced to wear for 3 decades. Outside, the air was cold and bright. The sky clear, a day that felt made for departure. My rental car waited at the curb, I loaded my suitcase into the trunk, slid into the driver's seat, and exhaled a long, slow breath as the engine hummed awake. The second I pulled away from the hotel, my shoulders dropped. They had returned early. That wasn't part of my plan, but it didn't matter. The house was gone, the sale complete, the keys handed over. Nothing they did could undo it. For the first time in my life, I was ahead of them. The drive to the airport was strangely peaceful. No frantic calls, no guilt-laden texts, no draining conversations about responsibility or loyalty, or all the ways I had allegedly failed as a daughter. Just quiet roads and the promise of cold northern water waiting for me. By the time I parked and wheeled my suitcase through the terminal doors, I felt lighter than I had felt in years. The flight boarded early. I chose a window seat. I pulled a book from my bag, a novel I'd bought months ago but never read because someone else always needed something more urgent than my own stillness. I didn't get past the first page. Instead, I watched the runway as the plane gathered speed, lifting into the air, pulling me away from the ruins of a life I had refused to rebuild again. When we landed in Seattle 3 hours later, I could already smell salt in the air. The harbor was alive with movement. Cranes shifting containers, ferries slicing through the gray water, gulls circling overhead. And there, towering above everything, the cruise ship I would board tomorrow. Not theirs. Mine. A ship I had chosen. A trip I had paid for. An escape I didn't need permission to enjoy. I checked into a small waterfront hotel and dropped my suitcase on the bed. My phone, still off, remained untouched in my purse. I took a shower, letting the hot water soak through my hair, my shoulders, washing away the remnants of old expectations that clung like dust. Later, I walked along the pier, watching children eat ice cream, couples holding hands, tourists taking photos of the skyline. Normal, everyday joy. Joy that didn't cost anyone else anything. Joy I was allowed to feel without fear of being punished for it. I sat on a bench overlooking the water as the sun dipped low, the horizon melting into soft gold and gray. The breeze carried the scent of brine and fresh fish and the damp wood of the pier. That was when I finally turned my phone back on. It vibrated angrily to life. Notifications flooded the screen, 12 voicemails, 19 texts, 4 missed calls from numbers I didn't recognize. One voicemail transcription popped up, tagged as urgent. Dad, Mara, you need to call us immediately. We went to the house and there are strangers inside. They said they own it. What did you do? This is unbelievable. We need to talk right now. Another appeared. Mom, how could you do something so horrible? You sold our home? Your father's blood pressure is through the roof. Nadia is in tears. We deserve an explanation. Answer your phone. Another. Nadia, are you insane? You can't just sell our house. You're legally required to give us notice. The police were here. Do you want Mom to collapse? Call me now. I scrolled through them calmly. Not a single message said, "We're sorry." Not one said, "We understand why you did it." No, I saw the same entitlement, the same anger, the same disbelief that their comfort could be taken from them. They weren't shocked because they had lost a home. They were shocked because they had lost control. I opened none of the voicemails. I deleted them all, then blocked their numbers again, one by one, until the silence felt like the soft closing of a door. A door I would never open again. As the last block confirmed, I felt my spine lengthen, my chest loosen, my breath deepen. I wasn't punishing them. I wasn't being cruel. I was protecting myself for the first time in my life. A woman walking by with a knit hat and a golden retriever glanced at me, smiled politely, and kept going. The world didn't stop. It didn't judge. It didn't collapse. Outside my family's dysfunctional orbit, I was just another person sitting by the water enjoying the sunset. Free. Untethered. Alive. That night, back in my hotel room, I wrote in the leather-bound journal that had mysteriously arrived on my doorstep. The first page wasn't poetic or profound. It was simple. Today, I chose myself, and tomorrow, I will again. I slept deeply, dreamlessly, without the weight of responsibility pinning my limbs to the mattress. In the morning, the sky glowed soft pink behind the Seattle skyline. My ship was waiting at the pier, rising out of the mist like a promise. I took a long, steady breath. Tomorrow I would sail north. Tonight I would rest. And somewhere back in Tacoma, 3 people who had underestimated me all my life were learning the first lesson of their lives. When you push someone to their breaking point, they don't break. They walk away. The ship's horn bellowed through the cold morning air, deep and resonant, a sound that felt less like noise and more like an announcement. You're leaving. You're truly leaving. I stood at the railing on the embarkation deck, my suitcase beside me, my breath visible in the sharp air. The sky over Seattle was streaked with soft gray and pale gold, the kind of light that made everything look washed clean. I hadn't slept much, not because of anxiety, but because my body still didn't understand what freedom felt like stretched across an entire night. It was strange to wake up and not brace for something. A message, a demand, a complaint, a crisis. Strange and quietly wonderful. The boarding process moved slowly, a line of excited families, newlyweds, retired couples in matching jackets. I didn't speak to anyone. No one asked anything of me. I was invisible in the best possible way. By the time I reached the check-in desk, I felt like the ground beneath me had shifted. A staff member scanned my ticket, smiled warmly, and said, "Welcome aboard, Ms. Jensen. We hope this journey brings you joy." Joy. Such a simple word. One I hadn't allowed myself to want, let alone expect. I stepped onto the ship. The lobby rose several floors above me, all glass elevators and glittering lights reflected on marble floors. People bustled around, chattering, snapping photos, clutching champagne flutes. I found my way to my cabin, small but beautiful, with a balcony overlooking the endless gray-blue stretch of ocean. The bed was covered in crisp white linens. There were thick robes in the closet, a bottle of sparkling water on the table with my name handwritten on a card. It was all so mine. Mine, in a way my own house hadn't been for years. I placed my suitcase in the corner without unpacking and stepped onto the balcony. The wind whipped against my face, sharp and invigorating. Far below, tugboats nudged the ship into position. Crew members shouted instructions. Gulls circled overhead, probably waiting for food scraps that wouldn't appear for hours. And then, slowly, we began to move. The dock shifted behind us. The city drifted backward. The water churned, and I felt something inside me untether itself completely. No messages buzzing, no guilt gnawing, no footsteps demanding something on the other side of a door. Just ocean, sky, and the sound of my own breathing. I stayed there until the shoreline dissolved into a gray ribbon in the distance. The morning passed quietly. I wandered the ship in no particular direction, past the observation deck, the small library, the coffee bar tucked into a corner like a secret. I ordered a latte and sat by a window, watching waves slice apart as the ship cut through them. Across the lounge, an elderly woman with silver hair and bright red lipstick smiled at me. "First time?" she asked. I nodded. "Yes. You look like someone who just made a big decision," she said, not unkindly. I blinked, surprised, then laughed softly. "Something like that," she tapped her temple. "We older women can smell a life shift from 100 yards away. Enjoy it, don't overthink it." I thanked her, though she'd already turned back to her crossword puzzle. The interaction lingered with me. There was something liberating about being seen without being known. After lunch, I returned to my cabin. A notification blinked on my phone. Voicemail transcription from a blocked number. I shouldn't have seen it, I shouldn't have looked. But the preview was right there on the lock screen. "Dad, your mother is sick with worry. We had to leave the motel. We don't have anywhere to..." I locked the screen immediately, pulse steady. Not my problem, not anymore. I set the phone face down on the desk, walked onto the balcony, and stayed there until the cold bit into my fingers. By late afternoon, the ship approached the inside passage. Mountains rose like jagged guardians on either side, wrapped in mist. Pine trees crowded the shoreline. The water deepened to a dark green, smooth as glass in some places, choppy in others. I stood shoulder to shoulder with strangers, all of us turning our heads to follow the shifting scenery. A child gasped when a bald eagle swooped low over the water. A couple embraced. A man with binoculars whispered, "Look, whales." And then I saw them, 3 dark shapes arching through the water in perfect rhythm. First the curve of their backs, then the spray of their breath rising like smoke. A woman beside me wiped a tear. "Beautiful," she whispered. I nodded. My throat tightened unexpectedly. Beauty, wonder, awe. So many emotions I hadn't let myself feel in years, because they required vulnerability, space, safety, things I could never have while drowning under my family's expectations. I watched the whales until they disappeared, feeling something inside me shift again, subtle but certain. After dinner, I walked the upper deck alone. Lights reflected off the water, shimmering like scattered stars. I wrapped my coat tighter around myself, but the cold didn't bother me. It felt honest, bracing, like it demanded presence instead of fear. A thought slipped into my mind then, uninvited but gentle. They aren't chasing you. For the first time in 32 years, my parents had no access to me. No house to occupy, no bills to transfer to my name, no door to knock on, no emotional leverage to twist. They were 3 adults facing the first consequences of their own choices, a life untethered from me. I paused by the railing and looked up at the sky. A streak of faint green shimmered near the horizon, barely visible but unmistakable. Aurora. I wasn't expecting it this early in the trip. It wasn't spectacular, not the sweeping ribbons of color seen in postcards, but a quiet hint, a whisper of what was coming. It felt like a sign. I stayed on deck until my fingers ached from the cold. When I finally returned to my cabin, I changed into the robe, made tea, and sat at the small desk with the leather journal. I opened to the second page. Today, I wrote, "I am not running away. I am walking toward." The words looked almost too bold on the page, like they belonged to someone braver than me, but they weren't fiction, they were truth. I thought about my parents then, not with anger, not even with sadness, with distance, a distance I had earned. Maybe they were back at the motel, figuring out where to go next. Maybe they were still leaving voicemails. Maybe they were finally realizing that their safety net had been a person, not a resource, a person who had stepped away. I didn't feel guilt. I felt relief. I closed the journal, turned off the lights, and slipped into bed. The hum of the ship vibrated softly beneath me like a lullaby. Sleep came easily, deeply, without dreams of arguments or guilt or slammed doors or whispered accusations. In the morning, the ship would dock in Ketchikan. In a few days, I would see glaciers, mountains, icy waters untouched by the cruelty of people who claimed to love me. But tonight, wrapped in warmth while the Pacific stretched endlessly around me, I understood something profound. This wasn't the beginning of my revenge. It was the beginning of my life, and I wasn't afraid of where it would take me next. The first thing I heard when I stepped onto the dock in Juneau was the sound of gulls crying overhead, sharp and bright against the cold Alaskan air. The second was laughter, real laughter, coming from a group of passengers taking pictures with a giant wooden carving near the pier. It felt strange, being surrounded by joy that wasn't forced or performed or taken at someone else's expense. Joy that didn't require me to dim myself. The day stretched ahead of me like an open road. Glacier excursion at noon, a wildlife tour after that. A quiet dinner overlooking snow-capped peaks. No demands, no guilt, no obligations. I wrapped my scarf tighter around my neck and walked down the gangway, letting myself blend into the stream of travelers heading into the port. Juneau was breathtaking, even wrapped in winter's muted colors. Mountains rose sharply on all sides, their peaks dusted white. The air tasted cold and clean. It smelled like pine and sea and ice. Everything felt crisp, honest. I boarded the glacier shuttle with a handful of other passengers, an older couple from Texas, a family with 2 teenage boys, a solo traveler about my age who spent the entire ride staring out the window with wide, reverent eyes. Maybe we were all here for different reasons, but the awe was the same. As we climbed the winding roads toward Mendenhall Glacier, I let my thoughts drift. Not toward my parents, but away from them, like the tide receding from the shore. Their voices, their demands, their disappointment, they all felt muted now, distant, like echoes from another person's life. When the glacier came into view, everything inside me went quiet. A massive wall of blue-white ice stretched across the horizon, ancient and immense, glowing faintly in the pale daylight. It looked alive, breathing slowly, shifting, groaning under the weight of millennia. Beautiful, brutal, unapologetic. I stepped off the shuttle in silence and followed the path toward the overlook. The closer I got, the more powerful the glacier felt, as if standing near it required a kind of reverence. A guide spoke softly beside me. "Glaciers are storytellers," he said. "They hold generations of memory. You can read an entire lifetime in their layers." I almost whispered back, "Me too." I stood there for a long time, letting the cold seep into my fingertips, watching the ice catch the light. Something deep in my chest shifted, like a knot loosening, like a weight settling in the correct place instead of crushing me. I realized then that I wasn't grieving my family. Not anymore. I was grieving the version of myself who'd tried so hard to earn love from people who didn't know how to give it. Letting her go felt quieter than I expected. Gentle, even. After the glacier, we stopped at a small visitor center. I wandered alone down a side trail that wound through evergreens heavy with frost. My boots crunched softly on the snow-packed path. The air stung my cheeks. Halfway down the trail, my phone vibrated inside my pocket. For a heartbeat, instinct clawed up my spine. That old reflex, the one shaped by decades of conditioning. Answer, respond, fix it. But I didn't. I let it ring until the vibration stopped. When I reached the trail's end, I found myself overlooking a frozen lake scattered with floating ice. The silence was profound, like the world was holding its breath. I pulled out my phone then, not to check messages, but to take a picture. Just one. A reminder of what it felt like to choose myself. When I returned to the ship later that afternoon, cheeks flushed and fingers numb, I made tea and curled up on the balcony with a blanket. The ship hadn't left port yet. I could still hear the distant chatter of passengers returning from excursions. Their excitement drifted upward like smoke. I took out my journal, flipped to the next blank page, and wrote, "I'm not healing from them. I'm healing from who I became for them." The words hit deeper than I expected. I pressed the tip of the pen against the page until the ink thickened. Just then my phone buzzed again. I sighed. It wasn't fear anymore. It wasn't dread. It was fatigue. A quiet, bone-deep fatigue for the predictable patterns of people who never changed. Still, curiosity nudged me. I checked the caller ID. Unknown number. Voicemail transcription appeared seconds later. Nadia. "Mara, it's me. Please don't hang up if you get this. I'm not calling to yell. I'm not even calling to defend myself. I need to talk to you, please." I closed the notification and set the phone down. I didn't delete it, but I didn't reply. Not yet. That night, the ship sailed north under a cloudless sky. Every star looked like a pinprick in a vast black curtain. I went to the observation deck just before midnight, joining the small crowd gathered with cameras and blankets. The aurora appeared suddenly, like someone had painted the sky with light. Green ribbons stretched across the darkness, shimmering, shifting, undulating like breath. People gasped. One woman cried softly. A child whispered, "It looks like magic." It was magic. The kind that didn't demand anything from me. The kind that existed without needing to take. I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes. Not sad tears. Not overwhelmed tears. Just release. A man beside me said, "You traveling alone?" "Yes." "Good for you," he said simply. And somehow those 3 words hit harder than any compliment I'd ever received. Good for you. 3 words my family had never said. When I finally returned to my cabin, I wrapped myself in the robe and sat cross-legged on the bed, letting the afterglow of the northern lights linger in my chest. I reached for my phone, not to respond, not to open old wounds, but because for the first time I felt strong enough to listen without being pulled under. One voicemail, from Nadia. Her voice crackled with something raw, something unfamiliar. "Everything's a mess," she said. "Mom's blaming me. Dad's blaming you. They're staying with me because they don't have anywhere else to go. And it's hell, Mara. I didn't know. How could I know? I thought you were exaggerating. I thought you were just being dramatic when you set boundaries. But now they're treating me exactly like they treated you." Her breath hitched. "I'm sorry, I really am. I'm not asking you to fix anything. I just understand now. For the first time, I understand." The message ended. I lay back on the pillows, staring at the ceiling. Understanding wasn't forgiveness. And forgiveness wasn't obligation. And obligation wasn't love. But a crack of something, not softness but possibility, opened inside me. Not for my parents, but maybe for her. A tapping on the door pulled me from my thoughts. Room service, delivering the tea I'd ordered earlier. I thanked the staff member, set the cup on the nightstand, and crawled under the blankets. The ship rocked gently, like a cradle on an endless sea. Tomorrow we would reach Sitka. Tomorrow I would walk through a forest older than anything I'd ever known. Tomorrow the world would still be wide and open and full of paths that led away from the people who once defined me. But tonight, as the northern lights danced behind my eyelids, I understood something vital. Healing wasn't a destination. It was this: a quiet room, a cold sea, a sky full of impossible color, and the realization that I no longer needed anyone to choose me, because I had finally chosen myself. The air in Sitka was sharper than the other ports, cleaner, colder, threaded with the scent of spruce and ocean salt. I stepped off the ship early that morning, with my hands buried deep in my pockets, feeling the strange weightlessness of a person who no longer feared what waited for her back home. Nothing was waiting, nothing was chasing, nothing was owed. The sky was a pale winter blue. The mountains rose jagged and ancient around the harbor, and somewhere deep inside me, a quiet voice whispered, "This is what life feels like when it's yours." I joined the group heading toward the Tongass National Forest. The trail was soft with fallen needles, the earth damp beneath my boots. Towering trees surrounded us, their trunks wide enough to dwarf even the tallest man in our group. These giants had stood for hundreds of years, long before my family existed, long after their voices had stopped echoing in my head. About 20 minutes into the hike, our guide stopped near a massive fallen tree, its roots twisted like a sculpture. "Storm brought this one down," she said. "It looks tragic, but actually fallen trees nourish the forest. They make room for sunlight, new growth." I stared at the tree for a long time. The meaning was too perfect to ignore. Sometimes, something has to fall for something else to grow. As the group continued, I lingered a few steps behind. My phone buzzed inside my jacket pocket. I hesitated, then pulled it out. Not fearfully, just aware. One new voicemail. Not from my parents, from Nadia. I didn't press play. Not yet. Instead, I slid the phone back into my pocket and kept walking, breathing in the cold air until it felt like it had carved open a new space inside me. Later, at the overlook above the sound, I sat on a wooden bench and finally listened. "Mara," Nadia's voice cracked on my name. "They're impossible. They're blaming me for everything. They say you put us here, but they're taking it out on me. They think yelling will magically get the house back. They don't understand how the world works, or maybe they just don't care." She sniffed, a wet, exhausted sound. "I'm tired. I'm so tired. I wish I had listened to you sooner. I'm not asking you to fix anything. I needed you to know that I see it now. All of it. Everything you carried alone." Her voice cracked again. "I'm sorry, Mara." The message ended. I stared out at the water below, watching a patch of sunlight ripple across the waves. Nadia's apology didn't undo anything. It didn't erase the years. It didn't change the past. But it softened something jagged inside me, not because she wanted forgiveness, but because it was the first time someone in my family had acknowledged my pain without twisting it into an accusation. For once, someone wasn't asking me to come back. They were asking me to let go. Back on the ship that afternoon, I went to the deck and leaned against the railing as we sailed from Sitka toward open water. The wind was brutal, slapping against my cheeks, but I didn't move. I wanted to feel it. The cold. The realness. The proof that I wasn't numb anymore. Later that night, as the ship moved steadily north, I sat in my cabin with the leather-bound journal and wrote, "I don't miss the girl I used to be. I grieve her, but I don't want her back. She survived long enough to deliver me here. I'm the one who gets to live." I closed the journal softly, feeling the truth of those words resonate in my bones. The rest of the cruise passed like a dream stitched together by cold winds, bright skies, quiet breakfasts, and long hours where no one needed anything from me. I hiked through snow-dusted trails, watched seals sunbathe on slabs of ice, and stood in awe as glaciers cracked and thundered into the sea. Every moment felt like a small reclamation. Every breath felt like a beginning. On the final night, as the ship turned south toward home, I stood alone at the stern, watching the water churn in our wake. The sunset was a riot of orange and pink, the colors smeared across the horizon like a promise. Tomorrow I would return to the mainland. Tomorrow I would step into a life with no house to maintain for ungrateful people, no debts I didn't make, no boundaries to explain, no expectations I was required to sacrifice myself for. Tomorrow I would be free in a way I had never been. My phone buzzed once in my pocket, not a call, a text from an unknown number. At first I ignored it. Then curiosity nudged me. I unlocked my phone. "Nadia, I'm leaving too. I don't know where yet, but I can't stay with them anymore. Thank you for showing me it's possible. Be safe, be happy. Maybe someday we'll talk again. No pressure." I read the message twice. Then I put my phone away and closed my eyes as the wind lifted my hair. Maybe someday we would talk again, maybe not. Either way, it wasn't a burden. It wasn't a demand. It wasn't a chain. It was just possibility. When the ship docked the next morning, the horizon washed in pale gold. I felt no sadness, only calm. A steady hum inside me that said, "Keep going." I disembarked with the other passengers, suitcase rolling behind me, the air sweet with the smell of salt and diesel and fresh beginnings. From the terminal, I ordered a rideshare to the airport, not to fly home, not yet. I didn't have a home right now, not in the traditional sense. What I had was choice, freedom, and an entire life ahead of me. At the airport cafe, waiting for my flight to Denver, my new beginning, I opened my journal one last time on the ship and added, "A house can be stolen. A bank account can be drained. A family can use you. But the moment you decide you matter, everything shifts. The story changes. You become your own safe place." The boarding call echoed through the terminal, and I picked up my bag. As I walked toward the gate, I didn't look back. There was nothing left behind me worth clinging to. Only everything ahead. And I stepped toward it without hesitation. Now, if you've stayed with me through this entire journey, through the betrayal, the awakening, the escape, and the rebirth, I'd love to hear from you. What would you have done in my place? Have you ever had to walk away to save yourself? Share your thoughts in the comments, like the video if it resonated, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that remind us we're stronger than the people who tried to break us.